The colony of Alaris floated in the cold dark of space, far from the bright worlds of the galaxy. Its sun was weak and dying. Its defense fleet was gone. Broken ships drifted like metal ghosts around the planet. Smoke and fire still burned from the last battle. Inside the control tower, Commander Reland stood in silence. His hands were shaking, but his voice was calm. "All channels open," he said. "Send the final distress signal." A young officer looked at him with fear in her eyes. "Sir, no one will answer." Reland did not look at her. He kept watching the main screen, where hundreds of enemy ships surrounded the planet like a dark storm. "Send it anyway." The signal went out into the endless void. No one answered. Hours passed. The enemy fleet slowly moved closer. Their ships were large and cruel in design, shaped like blades. Red lights covered their hulls. They did not rush. They did not need to. They knew the colony was weak. A message came from the enemy flagship. The face of their commander appeared on the screen. His cold eyes showed no emotion. "No one is coming," he said. "Power down your shields. Accept extinction with honor." The screen went dark. In the cities below, people gathered in shelters. Families held each other. Soldiers took positions near broken cannons that barely worked. Medical teams prepared for the worst. Children asked their parents if heroes were real. Reland closed his eyes for a moment. Years ago, this colony had helped a young human trade ship lost in space. They gave them food, fuel, and safe passage. It was a small act of kindness. Nothing more. Humans were still new to the galaxy back then. Weak. Learning. Reland whispered softly, "If you remember, now would be the time." The first wave of enemy fire struck the shield. The sky turned red. The shield shook violently. Warning alarms filled the control tower. Sparks flew from broken systems. Engineers shouted numbers that kept getting worse. Shield power at 40%. Another blast hit. The ground trembled. Buildings cracked. 25%. Reland felt the weight of every life on that planet. He forced himself to stand straight. Hold positions. Do not fire unless they land troops. Then it happened. The enemy ships suddenly stopped firing. The silence was strange. Heavy. Officers looked at each other in confusion. "Sir, scanners detect something." Reland stepped closer to the screen. "What is it?" The officer's voice shook. "One object. Extreme velocity. It is not using normal space travel." On the main display, space itself began to twist. The stars bent like soft light in water. A long crack formed in the darkness, glowing with blue energy. The enemy fleet moved back slightly. From inside the crack, something massive pushed forward. A ship. Black as night. Smooth. Sharp. Silent. It did not send a signal. It did not slow down. It tore through the void like it owned it. The crack sealed behind it, leaving only quiet stars. The human warship floated between the colony and the enemy fleet. On its side, bright white letters glowed. Terran Warship, Vanguard. Inside the enemy flagship, panic spread. That class of ship was banned, someone whispered. Commander Reland stared in disbelief. Humans. The warship finally transmitted a single message. The voice was calm. Strong. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Terran Warship Vanguard. You threaten the protected world." A pause. "You will now leave." The enemy commander appeared again, but this time his face was tense. "You send one ship against my entire fleet?" The human reply was simple. "Yes." Power levels around the human ship began to rise. Space around it started to shake again. On the colony below, people looked up at the sky filled with enemy ships, and one silent guardian. For the first time that day, hope returned. The silence before the end was over. And something far worse for the enemy had just begun. The enemy fleet did not move at first. Hundreds of warships floated in attack formation. Their weapons were charged. Their commanders were confused. One human ship stood against them. The enemy commander laughed, but the sound was forced. Destroy it. Dozens of red beams fired at once. The sky became a storm of light. The human warship did not dodge. It did not raise visible shields. Instead, the space around it bent. The beams curved. They twisted away from the hull as if reality itself refused to let the ship be touched. Inside the Terran warship Vanguard, Captain Elias Ward stood calmly on the command deck. His crew moved with sharp focus, but no one panicked. Gravity field stable, an officer reported. Energy absorption at 80%, another said. Ward nodded once. Return minimal force. The ship answered without sound. A wave spread outward from the Vanguard. It was invisible at first. Then the stars behind it stretched, like fabric pulled too tight. 3 enemy ships in the front line suddenly crushed inward. Not exploded. Crushed. Their metal folded like paper in a giant hand. Within seconds, they were nothing but silent debris. Shock moved through the enemy formation. That weapon is illegal, one enemy officer whispered. The commander's voice rose. Flank them. Surround the human vessel. The fleet split into attack wings. Missiles launched. Plasma torpedoes streaked across space. The Vanguard finally moved. It did not fly like normal ships. It blinked. One moment it was in front of the colony. The next moment it appeared inside the enemy formation. Too close. Energy blades extended from its sides, glowing white-blue. They were not physical weapons. They were controlled tears in space. The Vanguard sliced through 2 cruisers in a single pass. The ship split apart without explosion. Clean. Silent. On the colony below, Commander Ryland could barely speak. That is not war, he whispered. That is control. The enemy fleet began to retreat slightly, trying to regroup. But the human ship stayed among them like a shadow that could not be escaped. Inside the Vanguard, warning lights flickered softly. Captain, enemy reinforcements entering system, said the sensor officer. A new fleet jumped into the edge of the system. Larger ships. Heavier weapons. One massive command dreadnought moved to the center. Ward studied it quietly. They brought their pride. The new enemy commander sent a message. Human vessel, identify your fleet support. Ward answered without emotion. You are looking at it. The enemy dreadnought fired a focused beam stronger than anything used before. It burned through space toward the Vanguard. This time, the human ship raised a visible shield. The beam struck. Light exploded across the dark. The shockwave reached even the colony's upper atmosphere. Inside the Vanguard, systems trembled. Shield holding at 60%, reported the defense officer. Ward remained steady. Prepare phase shift. Outside, the Vanguard began to glow faintly. Its shape blurred. Then it vanished. The enemy beam continued forward into empty space. Gasps filled the enemy command deck. Where did it go? A second later, the Vanguard reappeared directly above the dreadnought. So close its shadow covered the giant ship. Ward gave a single order. Release compression strike. A focused field formed under the Vanguard. The dreadnought's hull bent inward slowly at first. Then faster. Metal screamed across open space. The ship collapsed from the center, crushed by invisible pressure. In less than 10 seconds, the pride of the enemy fleet was gone. Silence returned again. The remaining ships hesitated. Fear spread through their ranks. But the enemy commander was not finished. "Activate the Titan array," he ordered. From the back of the formation, a massive structure began unfolding. Larger than any ship. Covered in heavy armor and rotating cannons. Energy levels spiked far beyond normal weapons. Inside the vanguard, even experienced officers grew tense. "Captain, that is a system breaker." Ward looked at the screen calmly. "Good," he said. "Then they are finally serious." The Titan array locked onto the colony. The human warship turned slowly, placing itself between the weapon and the helpless world below. For the first time since arriving, the Vanguard's core began to overcharge. Space itself started to crack again around its hull. And this time, even the humans looked concerned. The Titan array continued to charge. A red sphere of energy grew at its center. It was not just a weapon. It was destruction shaped into light. If it fired, the colony below would turn into dust within seconds. On the surface of Alaris, people watched the sky in fear. Even from the ground, they could see the red glow growing brighter. Inside the Terran warship Vanguard, warning alarms echoed across the bridge. "Impact prediction," the tactical officer said, voice tight. "If it fires now, colony loss is total." Captain Elias Ward stood still, hands behind his back. "Open channel to colony command," he said. Commander Reland's face appeared on the main screen. His expression showed both fear and hope. "Human captain," Reland said softly, "why are you doing this? You do not owe us your lives." Ward looked at him for a long moment. "You once saved a Terran exploration ship," Ward replied. 23 years ago. It was damaged and lost. Your people gave them shelter." Reland's eyes widened. "That was a small act." Ward shook his head slightly. "To humans, kindness is never small." On the bridge, a young human officer whispered, "My mother was on that ship." Ward did not turn, but his voice softened. "She told me about this world," he said. "She said when humanity was weak and alone, Alaris chose to help." The Titan array's glow grew even brighter. Reland swallowed. "We never expected payment." "You are not receiving payment," Ward said calmly. "You are receiving loyalty." Suddenly, a new message cut through all channels. It was the enemy commander. "Human vessel, you protect a dying world. Waste of resources. Stand down." Ward replied without anger. "Negative." The enemy commander's face twisted in frustration. "Then you will fall with them." The Titan array reached full charge. Inside the Vanguard, power levels spiked dangerously. "Captain," the chief engineer warned, "if we attempt direct counterfire, the strain will damage the core permanently." Ward nodded once. "Understood." He turned to his crew. "Prepare the Void Lance." Silence filled the bridge. Even the experienced officers looked uneasy. "Sir, that weapon was never approved for live use," said the tactical officer. Ward's voice was steady. "It is now." Deep inside the ship, massive systems began to activate. Layers of security unlocked. Heavy metal doors opened around a long central chamber. The Void Lance was not a missile. It was a focused tear in spacetime itself. Energy began flowing into the weapon. The ship trembled as if resisting its own power. On the enemy side, sensors screamed warnings. Unknown energy buildup detected on human vessel. The enemy commander shouted, "Fire the Titan array." The red beam launched. It tore through space toward the colony, unstoppable. The Vanguard moved forward to meet it. Instead of avoiding the blast, the human ship flew directly into its path. "Shield maximum," someone yelled. The beam struck the Vanguard. White light exploded across the system. The human shields cracked under pressure. Sections of the hull burned. On the colony below, people cried out as they saw the human ship disappear inside the red storm. Inside the Vanguard, systems overloaded. Structural damage rising. Core stability dropping. Captain Ward did not move. "Void Lance ready?" he asked. "Ready, but if we fire at this level, space distortion may spread beyond control," the science officer warned. Ward gave the order anyway. "Fire." The front of the Vanguard opened. A single line of pure blue light shot forward. It did not roar. It did not explode. It erased. The Titan array vanished first. Not destroyed. Gone. Then the beam continued through the enemy formation. Ships caught in its path disappeared like shadows under sunlight. Where the lance passed, nothing remained. No wreckage. No fire. Only empty space. The enemy fleet broke formation in terror. The Titan array was gone. Half their front line had ceased to exist. Inside the Vanguard, lights flickered. Cracks formed along the bridge walls. "Void instability increasing," shouted the science officer. "We may have damaged space itself." Behind the fleeing enemy ships, small fractures began appearing in the darkness. Thin blue cracks spread across the stars. Captain Ward watched them quietly. The battle was not over. And now, the void itself was beginning to respond. The blue cracks in space did not fade. They grew. Thin lines at first, like broken glass across the stars. Then the fractures widened. Light leaked from them, not red or white, but deep blue, like the heart of a dying sun. The enemy fleet had stopped attacking. They were running. Panic spread across their ships. Command signals overlapped. Formations broke apart. But escape was not simple. The cracks followed them. Inside the Terran warship Vanguard, every system was under stress. "Void distortion expanding," the science officer reported. The lance tore deeper than predicted. Captain Elias Ward stared at the main display. His face showed no fear, but his eyes were focused. "How far will it spread?" he asked. "Unknown. It may stabilize. Or it may consume everything in this sector." On the colony below, Commander Rilan watched the sky change. The stars themselves looked unstable, bending and flickering. "What have we done?" one of his officers whispered. Above them, the Vanguard drifted between the colony and the spreading fractures. Parts of its hull were blackened. Small fires burned along its outer shell. Then something moved inside one of the largest cracks. At first it looked like shadow. Then the shadow shifted. The crack pulsed, and a shape began to push outward. Not a ship. Not metal. Something alive. "Contact," the sensor officer on the Vanguard said, voice trembling. "Unidentified entity emerging from void rupture." The bridge fell silent. The shape slipped halfway through the crack. It was massive, but unclear, like smoke given form. No eyes. No weapons. But it felt aware. Across every ship in the system, human and enemy alike, systems flickered. Energy drained. Lights dimmed. "It is feeding on the distortion," the science officer said. The void lance opened something. Captain Ward gave orders quickly. "All batteries ready. Target the rupture, not the entity." The crew obeyed without question. The enemy fleet also saw it now. Their fear shifted. It was no longer about humanity. It was about survival. For the first time in this battle, the enemy commander sent a message to the Vanguard. "What have you brought into this system, human?" Ward answered calmly. "Something we hoped never to see." The entity pushed further through the crack. The edges of the rupture widened, tearing open faster. On the colony, gravity fluctuated. Buildings shook. Oceans moved unnaturally. Inside the Vanguard, the chief engineer shouted, "If the rupture expands, it will swallow the colony first." Ward clenched his jaw. "Charge main cannons. Full output." "Captain," the tactical officer said, "direct fire into unstable space could destroy us." Ward replied, "If we do nothing, everything is lost." The Vanguard positioned itself directly in front of the largest rupture. The entity moved toward it, slow and silent. Then the human ship fired. Massive beams of white-blue energy slammed into the crack itself. The edges trembled violently. The entity reacted. It stretched outward, almost touching the Vanguard's hull. A wave of darkness rolled over the human ship. Inside, power levels dropped sharply. Energy drain detected. Life support fluctuations. Ward stood firm. Maintain fire. The Vanguard's weapons continued striking the rupture. The crack began to shrink slightly. The enemy fleet saw the opportunity. Instead of fleeing, several of their ships turned back. They began firing into the rupture as well. For a brief moment, former enemies fought the same threat. The entity pulsed angrily. The rupture shook violently. Then, with one final surge of combined firepower, the largest crack snapped closed like a wound sealing. The entity was cut in half by reality itself. The remaining half vanished into nothing. Silence returned. The smaller fractures across the stars slowly faded. Inside the Vanguard, lights flickered back to normal. Damage reports filled the bridge. Hull integrity critical. Core stability unstable. Captain Ward exhaled slowly. The enemy fleet, now scattered and damaged, began retreating fully. No threats. No final attack. Just fear. On the colony below, people looked up at the wounded human warship. They were alive. But barely. Inside the Vanguard, the engineer approached the captain. "Sir, the core will not survive another jump." Ward nodded. "Then we stay until the colony is safe." Outside, the stars stabilized again. The battle was over. But the cost of using a weapon never meant to exist had nearly destroyed more than the enemy. And somewhere deep in the dark, something had noticed. The stars looked normal again. But nothing felt normal. The enemy fleet had fully retreated. Their ships disappeared into distant jump points without pride, without formation. They left behind wreckage, silence, and fear. Above the colony of Alaris, the Terran warship Vanguard remained still. Smoke drifted from broken sections of its hull. Parts of its outer armor were melted or missing. Emergency lights blinked across its dark surface. Inside the ship, damage reports continued. Core temperature unstable. Shield grid offline. Long-range drive destroyed. Captain Elias Ward listened to each report without interrupting. His crew moved carefully now, slower than before. Some were injured. Some leaned against walls for support. They had won. But victory felt heavy. On the colony, Commander Rilan ordered rescue ships to launch. "Send medical teams. Send engineers. They stood for us. Now we stand for them." Small colony craft rose into orbit. They approached the Vanguard carefully, as if afraid it might disappear like the enemy ships had. Inside the human ship, the science officer spoke quietly. "Captain, we are detecting faint energy signals beyond the system." Ward turned his head slightly. "Enemy reinforcements?" "No, sir. The signal pattern matches the void distortion earlier. It is distant, but it is watching." A cold silence filled the bridge. Ward looked at the stars on the screen. "Record the signal. Mark it. But we do not chase ghosts." Docking clamps connected between colony ships and the Vanguard. Alien engineers entered carefully, surprised by how human the corridors looked, simple, clean, built for function. They found human crew helping their wounded first before asking for help themselves. Reland personally came aboard. He walked onto the human bridge and stood before Captain Ward. "You saved us," Reland said softly. Ward shook his head. "We defended a friend." Reland looked around at the damage. "At terrible cost." Ward finally allowed himself a small, tired smile. Human history is built on terrible cost. Suddenly, the main screen flickered. A transmission forced its way through all systems. Not enemy. Not colony. The stars on the display shifted. They formed patterns. Lines connected between distant systems. Then a single symbol appeared, blue, like the cracks before. The same color as the void lance. The bridge grew quiet. "It is not language," the science officer whispered. "It is awareness." The symbol pulsed once. Every sensor aboard the Vanguard spiked. Then the signal vanished. The stars returned to normal. Reland looked at Ward. "Did we awaken something?" Ward did not answer immediately. He stepped closer to the screen. "Not awaken," he said quietly. "Reminded." The Vanguard had used the Void Lance before, long ago, during a hidden war humanity never shared. They believed the Void was empty. They were wrong. The earlier rupture had not been an accident. It had been a warning. Deep in interstellar space, beyond mapped systems, a region of darkness shifted slightly. Shapes moved where no stars existed. The Void had memory. And it remembered the lance. Back on the Vanguard, engineers worked fast. "Captain, we can restore partial power. But the ship cannot remain here long." Ward nodded. "Evacuate all non-essential crew to the colony until repairs are complete." Reland stepped forward. "You may stay as long as needed. Alaris owes you more than we can repay." Ward faced him. "Then remember this moment. When another small world calls for help, answer." Reland gave a slow nod. "We will." Hours later, temporary repairs were complete. The Vanguard's engines flickered back to life, weak but stable. The colony ships pulled away. From the surface, millions watched the black warship prepare to leave. Before jumping, the Vanguard sent one final system-wide message. "Humanity does not forget." Then the damaged warship entered low-power warp and vanished into the stars. Silence returned to Alaris. But this silence was different. It was not fear. It was understanding. Across the galaxy, rumors began spreading. One human ship had shattered an invasion fleet. One human captain had torn space itself to defend a promise. And somewhere far beyond the edge of mapped space, something ancient shifted in the darkness. Because the void had been touched. And this time, it was watching humanity back.